The Apostate and His Wife. I'm the Apostate. I'm Vern.
And I'm his wife. I'm Shauna. Thanks for joining us today. It's pretty cold outside here today, about minus 20, minus 30 with wind chill. That's Celsius, so somewhere between minus 4 and minus 22 Fahrenheit. So it's too cold to be outside, pretty windy. We've decided to heat ourselves up by digging into some more of that hot Rutherford history.
We got a lot of good comments on the gold mine.
For sure, and a lot of curiosity about the information,
Yeah.
where he's getting that from.
So when I was doing my research, I was looking for Russell and his divorce. And up came this article, and I'll give you the website. It's called jwdivorces.bravehost.com. And there's just books and books and books of information on there. It looks to me, and then I went to look who did all this. And it's kind of anonymous. I'm not sure. I'm not the best at finding stuff, but it's I think it's done by lawyers.
Well, there's definitely somebody with a legal passion and also the knowledge to dig through these old documents.
Well, someone had the license to pull up archives, legal archives, because we were reading transcripts.
A lot of this is public domain.
Huh?
It sits there. You just have to know where to look, right?
Interesting.
Like in all of these archives were pre-computerized records.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So you literally have to go to these old facilities or wherever these files are kept and dig into them. So,
well, this document's a new document because it always references 2021 when it does the comparison in the money value
to the dollar.
Yeah. So this is only a year old.
Yeah.
This is some new stuff,
Well,
like new old stuff, I guess.
Somebody put a lot of time and energy into this, and we thank them for it because, to see it all compiled together sure really gives you an overview.
So whoever's out there, thank you very much. I did write you a note. Haven't heard back, but thank you. And we will do our best to get this out. And I think that was the intent, to get this out to the people.
Yeah. One other thing, we'll be sure to put the link for this website in the description below the podcast video here, so you can check it out there too.
Yeah, there's no secrets.
No.
Now, yeah, I was going to talk about some scriptures, but as I was going through this Rutherford and Russell stuff, especially we started uncovering Russell, it was kind of like a new level of an awakening for me. It just gave me a whole different look, because when I was in the organization about 1996, they made me a ministerial servant, and I used to have to go up on the platform and do 15-minute parts from the Proclaimer's book on these two guys, Rutherford and Russell, because none of the elders wanted that part, because it was old history. I wasn't really interested in it back then. I'm not a history buff at all, but this stuff, for some reason, being on this side of the fence, is fascinating on how we all get sucked in.
This glimpse into the whole JW world is absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's...
Yeah. Now, it's helped me to see the scriptures differently. And you notice as we've done this channel, and this is real time, as we're putting out videos for you guys out there, this is real time where we've been waking up. I've been waking up, and we've been putting out videos just about daily. There's hundreds of videos.
Well, it's amazing what you realize in a day,
Yeah. So it's kind of a track record, but now it's the level of waking up now after looking at this deep history is just really wakes you up, like really solid. I think this is the best thing to share with people.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Now, the other thing, I see the scriptures differently, and the other thing that's kind of weird in this whole process of waking up, and I'm going to mention it, but information has been coming to us at the right time. I don't want to sound biblical, but if I was looking at this at the beginning, it would have been too much. I would have quit.
You wouldn't have been ready.
But somehow this information got into our hands at the right time.
If you think about it, Vern, it was like 7 months ago when I said, what is the big deal about being apostate? Look at the definition of the word. And the look that he gave me, folks, was just like, it was like I had him in the crosshairs because I didn't understand how dirty of a word, like how that word has been twisted within the JW organization. everybody is apostate to something. I'm an apostate Roman Catholic.
Well,
It
the
means,
JWs are mostly Roman Catholic.
well,
X.
a lot of those all of those JW converts are apostates because they are now apostate to the religion that they no longer believe in.
Well, I was new to this religion.
You know, this whole sentiment of apostate being against God, that's crap. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to look at the Bible here. And we weren't going to really use this channel as a Bible discussion channel too much, but it's more of a history, looking into the history. But I wanted to look at this one scripture, Matthew 7:24-27. And this is kind of how I see all the apostates out there helping. So it says, everyone, this is Jesus speaking. He says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does them, and does not do them, will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it.
So where we live, people, we're a couple hours from the Rocky Mountains, and I don't know if you've ever seen them. They are majestic, majestic, towering peaks. You can go on hikes there and follow these deep ravines and fantastic canyons that have been carved out by water. What starts with a little stream, like a few people getting together and sharing their opinion. Eventually, when you add enough drips, it turns into a raging torrent that can carve out rock or carve out the tower.
Yeah. And that's what's happening today. All the
yeah.
apostates out there, like this person that built this website, or peoples that put this together, all of us together are like these little streams, and we all join together all the apostate channels. And it doesn't matter. We have different ideas, different beliefs. Some don't believe in the scriptures, some do. And it doesn't really matter. But the one purpose is we're all taking down the tower because it's built on lies.
Oh, yeah. You add enough water and eventually you're going to have a wave, and the tower can't withstand that. So well done.
So this other scripture I thought was interesting, and sometimes these just show up. Isaiah 43:2, I was putting in water, right? It says, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flames shall not consume you. So I think about us apostates out there. We're doing a good work, and we're passing through these waters. And I think by the material coming to us at the right time, I think that's just really God's Spirit being with us. And why do I say that?
Let's go.
Why do I say that? Well, because the apostates are going through fires or going through waters, and God used waters to destroy before. So we're like waters.
Waters are cleansing.
Yeah. It's going to cleanse the tower. That's what it's doing. Anyways, we're getting off topic. Today we're talking about the coup.
The coup.
The coup.
Not our coops.
It's spelled coup.
Yes, but that's a silent P, dear.
It's a good thing you're on this channel.
It's a good thing that I know French, eh? Anyways,
sorry.
It's a coup.
Okay, the coup begins. Get your opponents relaxed and out of town. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle, November 26, 1916. All Pastor Russell's activities continue. Reigns to A.I. Ritchie. Remember, we talked about him.
He was the vice president of the society at the time.
Yeah, latter will probably be elected president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. 10,000 members can vote on it. Meeting to be held in Pittsburgh in January, and pastors will not. What? Filed?
Yeah, the will wasn't filed yet.
Oh,
remember,
pastors will.
Joseph, right? Joseph Russell hadn't even been dead for 30 days yet.
Charles Taze Russell?
Yes, Russell.
Yes.
Sorry, pardon me. Charles Russell hasn't been passed for 30 days yet.
So now, how did Rutherford get the seat when A.I. Ritchie was in line for it?
Well, there was still an election.
Yeah, so let's read that. It's going to talk about it here. It says that A.I. Ritchie, vice president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, will be the next president, directing force of the Pastor Russell's religious enterprises, is the belief expressed by certain persons high up in the councils of Russellism. It is also hinted that the will of the late pastor will possibly convey some suggestion as to whom he would wish to succeed him. The will has not yet been filed for probate, but it is stated that the document will express a number of the late Mr. Russell's wishes and suggestions as to how he would prefer to have some branches of the work conducted. Pastor Russell did not desire that his will be filed until some time after his death. He died October 31st.
So to me, that means there was maybe something salacious in there.
Mm-hmm. One of the provisions of the will, according to the authoritative information, calls, you know what I think it was?
What?
I think he had to give Rutherford time to sink all the assets into the Watchtower so his wife couldn't get anything. His whole life was about keeping his wife penniless.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's my theory. Let's read. One provision of the will, according to the authoritative information, calls for the appointment of an editorial staff to carry on the publication of the Watchtower, one of Russell's papers. It is understood that the pastor named person whom he wishes to serve in this capacity. It is said that the pastor has left enough unpublished matter from his own pen to fill a body of the Watchtower for several years to come.
That was mentioned before too, yeah.
According to a statement made yesterday by A.H. McMillan of Columbia Heights, who was a personal assistant. So that's where that A.H. McMillan, he was a personal assistant to Pastor Russell. Mm-hmm. The death of the leader will not halt or retard the activity of the organization in the slightest degree. And here's what he says. In fact, he said, we are receiving hundreds of letters and telegrams every day from contributors stating that they have absolute confidence in the officers of the organization. Many of them say they are going to continue their donations, and others express an interest of increasing the amounts they have been giving. So it's funny how people get sucked into these guys, these cults, way back then. They're just wanting it to continue. Well, in reverence to the prospective new president, Mr. McMillan stated that he had no means of knowing who would be chosen. He explained that every person who contributes to the work is entitled to vote for each $10 given. What?
So they could buy a vote.
Really? So it's about money.
And it was, so if you think about that, it was $10 per person. Wow, that's a lot of money at that time.
Well, I think it says it here.
Pardon me.
There are no upwards of 10,000 persons in the United States.
There are upwards
of 10,000 persons in the U.S.
Yes.
who are eligible votes under this provision, and they will assemble, or such proportion of them as desired to do so, at Pittsburgh during the first week of January and vote for a president. Notices of election are now being mailed to the 100,000 shareholders, so-called.
So just do some quick math here. 10,000 votes at $10 each. That's a pretty good fundraiser, is it not?
Well, $10 was worth a lot of money.
Yes, it was.
Huh. That was like 20 times 10. That could be like $2,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. Now, times 100,000, there'd be like $250,000 nowadays just to vote. I think, if I'm reading that right. Now, although Mr. McMillan did not wish to comment on the possibilities as who would be elected, he agreed when the question was put to him that there was a deciding feeling in favor of Mr. Ritchie. So it looks like
so he figured that Ritchie would get the position.
Yeah, and McMillan was his sidekick, Russell's sidekick.
Yeah.
So now J.F. Rutherford, one of the directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, which is incorporated in the state of Pennsylvania, has been mentioned as a possible candidate for the president of the society. But Mr. McMillan said that he doubted whether Mr. Rutherford would care to take the position. He is a resident of Los Angeles, California, and the work of his office would necessitate his moving to Brooklyn, which Mr. McMillan doubts he would care to do. He is at present time in Florida paying off Maria and Margaret. Who's Margaret?
I'm not sure.
His wife, maybe?
Yeah.
No, not yet. Maybe. Mr. Ritchie is being kept out of town, and his personal views in the matter were not directly learned. Mr. McMillan explained that under the provision of the Charter of Society, it became the duty of the Board of Directors to act in an executive capacity in the case of death of the President, who was Pastor Russell. There was no provision whereby the Vice President became the executive head. The work of the Society is now being conducted by the Board of Directors. To facilitate the work, they have appointed an executive committee answerable to the board, and this committee consists of Vice President Ritchie, Chairman, W.E. Van Amberg, Secretary and Treasurer, and J.F. Rutherford, Director. Director. That's a.
He was a director at the time.
You
yes.
could have a bunch of directors.
Correct.
So Pastor Russell has been the only president of the society. Up to 3 years ago, he controlled the votes of the organization, owing to the fact that he was the largest contributor. He was stated by Mr. McMillan that Pastor had given $300,000 to the work during the past 30 years. However, the number of smaller contributors wiped out the pastor's control, and he did not
vote.
He did not voted at the elections, although he was re-elected. At the present time, according to Mr. McMillan, there is no combination of votes large enough to control an election, and the outcome rests entirely with the voters at the annual meeting in Pittsburgh in January.
Interesting. So he's saying it was completely up for grabs at that point. Oh, look at this next title.
Coup at Watchtower World Headquarters Unleashed.
Coup.
Oh, coup. Sorry.
By the end of this, you'll be saying that right.
Coup.
Yes.
The Brooklyn Daily Eagle, July 31st, 1917. Russellites split, factions in fight to control society. Rutherford's enemies ousted. Old followers of Pastor Russell expelled, and Bethel and Tabernacle under guard. Interesting.
So we've gone ahead, what's about 8 months now, and this is what's going on. 10 months. Here we go.
Okay. Is that what we are? After months of smoldering jealousy, trouble has broken out in full force among the followers of the late Pastor Russell. At the present time, the Bethel established by the founder Russellism at the Columbia Heights address, they call it the Tabernacle.
And the Tabernacle.
Yeah.
At another location.
Oh, and the Tabernacle.
Yeah.
Okay, at Hick Street. Closely resemble armed camps, and two factions are engaged in a bitter fight to hold control of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the Holden Corporation, in effect for the various business enterprises and associations Pastor Russell established.
Dun, dun, dun. Wow, here we go.
Guards are stationed at all the doors of the various Russell's homes and offices in the Tabernacle. The guards have strict orders that the malcontents, those opposing Rutherford, are to be kept out. The little colony on Columbia Heights, which Pastor Russell founded 10 years ago, is fairly seething and bubbling with the accusations and recriminations of each faction is directing against the other.
Wow.
According to Judge Rutherford, the evil one is again trying to disrupt the society. On his orders, some of the oldest followers of the late pastor have been expelled from the society, and the scheme of running the society's publications by an editorial board selected in Pastor Russell's will has been almost entirely upset. 4 directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, according to Judge Rutherford, have no right to sit in the councils. These 4 directors, among them Robert Hirsch, are credited with being the leaders of the one faction in the present bitter fight for control. And Judge Rutherford and A.H. McMillan credited with having brought about Rutherford's election as Pastor Russell's successor, or the leaders of the other. Okay, so McMillan is actually on Rutherford's side. It is under the orders of Rutherford and McMillan that every door of Bethel and the Tabernacle has its sister or brother constantly on hand doing security duty just now.
Or sentry duty. Same thing, pretty much. I believe it was during Russell's life that McMillan actually started flipping sides to Rutherford, if I remember. So yeah, there's no love lost there.
Enemies of Rutherford evicted.
Right on.
Let one of those suspected of working against Judge Rutherford go out into the street, and his personal belongings are at once packed up and sent after him. On his return, he finds that the door is barred, and he is told that the Bethel can be his home no longer. Because of his state of affairs, 4 members of the society are now barred in their rooms at Bethel. They have told the Rutherford followers that only physical force can put them out, and the Rutherfordites, they called them the Rutherfordites, are hesitating to resort to this. Thus far, physical violence has been threatened only once in the row. This came about a week ago when Judge Rutherford directed the Reverend Macmillan that the 4 directors of the Watchtower Society should not be permitted to enter the society's offices in the tabernacle. The 4 directors insisted on their right to enter, and Macmillan held them off forcibly, at the same time directing a small boy to run for a policeman. When the officer arrived, Macmillan said something about kicking his ministerial brethren into the street, but the policeman failed to back him up, and a verbal battle alone resulted. Judge Rutherford was asked today to explain the causes back of this row, but said that he had no statement to make. That serious trouble had existed in the society for several days, was, however, admitted by Mrs. Hidgins. How did you say that?
I think I'd say
Hudgens, who said that she was Judge Rutherford's secretary, but who was classed by Judge as one of his 3 stenographers.
Yeah.
All the differences have been amicably adjusted, was Mr. Hudgens' words. Trouble dates back to Pastor's death. The present disturbance dates back to the time of Pastor Russell's death last fall. Ever since his death, bickerings and rivalries as to who should occupy the chief council seats have been in progress. A deadlock developed among the ministers of the sect over which of them have the honor of delivering the eulogies at Russell's funeral. Some speakers, after having been selected and notified of their appointment, were not permitted to go upon the platform. Beginning at that time, the present dominant faction grew up in the society under the leadership of Mr. Reverend Macmillan. It developed later that he was secretly working in the interests of Judge Rutherford, and where it has been generally accepted that A.I. Ritchie, vice president of the Watchtower Society, would succeed Pastor Russell as president of the society. At the annual meeting, the judge was found to have been elected. His election was announced as unanimous, and there was surprise among certain members of the society when it was later determined that a number of people had voted against him.
Oh, so how can you have a unanimous winning if people voted against you?
Well, it goes on to say Judge Rutherford gained his title as a probate judge in Western State. Wrong, it says. For several years before Pastor Russell's death, he acted as the founder's legal advisor. The character of the Watchtower Society provided for a president, a vice president, and a board of directors to govern all the rest, and Judge Rutherford pronounced it all legal. Now it is charged that he refuses to recognize his formal legal opinion and also refuses to accept legality of the papers which he formally passed upon. Judge Rutherford holds that the People's Pulpit Association, or one of the associations of this name, is the supreme body in Russellism. So he kind of flipped it on them.
Well, papers that he actually ruled as legal before, he's now saying they're not.
And he was never a judge, no. But that was just a title they gave him. Mm-hmm. So among the other factors that are now said to be creating unrest in the society is the questioning of the prophecies of the late founder. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, Pastor Russell devised a unique program which he named the Divine Plan. Connected with this, there was a chronology so arranged that the great prophecies of Daniel and Jeremy were due to begin their fulfillment not later than 1910.
Hey, are you so close to Jeremiah that you can just call him Jeremy?
Oh, did I say that wrong?
Daniel and Jeremiah.
Thank you, hon.
Unless you're really close, then it's Jeremy.
It's a good thing we have you on this channel.
Good thing I'm watching today.
To this he held unswervingly until about 1908. So they were talking about, he figured it should happen in 1910 mm-hmm. at the end, right?
And then he believed that up until 1908.
When asked about prophetic matters after that date, he felt less and less certain And at the time of his death, he answered, I don't
know. Wow.
People asked him.
Yeah.
To the three very important and vital questions affecting the well-being of the sect he had founded. The facts connected with this are just coming out in the society and are affording one of the bases for unrest. Also, that's today, really. Also, it has been learned that funds are not coming in with the readiness that was formerly one of the chief glories of the Russellism. Worry about finances, many of Pastor Russell's followers believe, had much to do with his sudden death. Wonder why.
Well, they're just saying that Russell probably, one of the reasons he was so stressed and died was because of the finances, right? As he died on his way back from his gold mine.
But he had 2.3 million in today's cash in his safe.
Wouldn't you be stressed about who was going to find that if you weren't
And
there?
his wife wanted $40 a month.
I know. He couldn't afford that.
Well, it really opens our eyes as to who the founder of this religion is. Now, the next one is Brooklyn Bethel captured. Now we get close. The Brooklyn Daily Edge, September 5th, 1917. You see, you'd never get this out of the Watchtower.
Yeah. And just so you know, when he says edge, he means eagle. It's the Brooklyn Daily Eagle.
Oh, sorry. It's a newspaper in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, from 1917.
From 1917.
Here we go again.
So the title of it is Rutherford ousted 4 directors, elected for life by Pastor Russell. They are forced out by new leader, Rutherford in control.
So Rutherford, they're saying that Rutherford was elected for life by Russell.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
here we
let's
go.
read the article. Following months of factional disturbances within the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, the unusual religious sect founded by the late Pastor Russell has restored peace among its members. It was learned today by the simple expedient of expelling all those who were opposed to the authority of its new head, Joseph F. Rutherford. 4 of the big men in the Council of the Bethel at Columbia Heights have recently been forced out with their families. It meant that about 30 persons, all told, were compelled to leave the sanctuary provided for them by late pastor. The 4 leaders were members of the board of directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society and supposedly should have held office for life in guiding the affairs of what used to be Russellism. See, even the papers back then knew that. The laws of the Russellites and the express direction of the late pastor stipulated that the directors were elected for life and could only be removed by a 2/3 vote of all the shareholders in the society. Despite this, President Rutherford, the successor to Pastor Russell, instituted a vigorous campaign against the authority of the 4 directors concerned. They were A.I. Ritchie, vice president of the society, and mentioned last fall as a probable successor of the pastor. And then there's R.H. Hirsch, a member of the editorial committee of the Watchtower, and then there was J.D. Wright and I.F. Hoskins.
So all 4 of those gentlemen were gone.
Each of the 4 were immensely powerful in the affairs of the society and was thoroughly conversant with some of its innermost secrets. And it is understood that this was the reason for the drive against them made by the new pastor, Judge Rutherford. For a time, the 4 were able to make a stand against the attacks of the President Rutherford. They gained a number of the adherents among the Watchtower members in the Bethel on Columbia Heights and the Tabernacle at Hicks Street, and took on the aspect of an armed camps. The 4 alleged malcontents on the one hand, so there was the 4 malcontents.
They were not happy. Malcontent literally means unhappy.
And the Rutherford and his adherents on the other issued a number of circular letters and booklets reciting a history of case, but the legal acumen that the new president finally won the victory. His ground for expelling the 4 men was that the board of directors had been illegally constituted under its charter.
Under its charter. The charter that he previously approved. Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, misread that. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is a Pennsylvania corporation and was established as such by Pastor Russell under the advice of Rutherford. So he did all the legal stuff.
But yeah, so he knew exactly how to counter it, I guess.
He built it. He built it in, I think.
And then he tore it apart.
He built it so he could tear it apart. Interesting. But after the death of the founder, his successors asserted that it was impossible for the Pennsylvania Corporation to elect directors for life in New York State and to be self-perpetuating as the charter provided. Although eminent legal advice was obtained by the four directors as to the property of their positions in the board of directors, Rutherford and those associated with him adopted steamroller methods, and the four directors were, by resolution of three other directors, notified that they had been removed. This was late in July. I guess it's kind of illegal.
Oh, absolutely. And what he's saying is what's legal in Pennsylvania isn't necessarily legal in New York.
Interesting. The four still held on at the Bethel, however. The four still held on at the Bethel, those four guys.
Yeah.
However, Rutherford had those with him, could not get the four to leave. So that finally, a guard was set with the instructions to bar any of the four from re-entering the Bethel should he leave to get supplies. A sort of cat and mouse game went on for several weeks at the Bethel, as the four had been informed by the sympathizers of the plans of the Rutherford followers, and therefore so arranged matters so they could guard the entrances and exits of one of their numbers who was daily delegated to go for food. They played this game until 2 weeks ago, but then some sort of compromise was reached, the nature of it being kept a close secret, by which the four agreed to leave.
They were bought out.
They were ousted, bag and baggage, with all the members of their families, and peace once more descended on Bethel. According to some members of the society, this is not a permanent peace, however. There is said to be still a measure of opposition to the tactics of Rutherford, and those conversant with the affairs of the society assert it is because the new president is breaking away from many of the tenets of the late Pastor Russell. Instead of Russellites, it is said that the members of the new sect are recognizing themselves as Rutherfordites. Never see that in a Watchtower. In line with this idea, it has been learned that the traveling lectures employed by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society have received new and rigid instructions direct from President Rutherford. These instructions provided that they must, in all their teachings, emphasize the rule of implicit obedience to Rutherford. Any opposition to him, it has been stated, no matter of what kind, is to result in their instant expulsion of the offender from the Watchtower Society. So he had a disfellowshipping program.
Yeah, but this isn't for members.
Oh, remember, this is the legal guys.
This is still like the governing, well, the first, or I guess the
10,000 voters.
Yes.
Or 100,000 voters.
Pretty much. If you wanted to be a shareholder, if you were a director, held any kind of position, and and spoke against him, you were gone.
It's kind of like the governing body today.
Oh yeah. Well, you can see where their policies started coming from. Anyways, okay, here we go.
So the next newspaper article, I'm going to get this right, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle.
Nice.
January 10th, 1918.
And it says,
go ahead.
General Rutherford completes coup. Brooklyn Tabernacle captured.
7th volume foes crushed at rally of Russellites.
Yeah.
There's another article.
Well,
there.
all opposed to Judge Rutherford were defeated in the election of elders and deacons. That's quite the church term. Interesting.
I'm just pulling up finished mystery book.
Anyway.
We'll let that pull up.
Yeah.
All opposed to Judge Rutherford defeated in election of elders and deacons. That's what they called them.
Well, yeah, but I know deacons from
Catholic.
Well, or just other church systems, Anglicans. I don't know the Catholic have deacons. Sorry, we have bishops, or they have bishops and archbishops, but that's definitely church.
So elders and deacons, that'd be like circuit overseers, maybe?
No, well, yeah, perhaps. We'll find out.
Judge Rutherford, they go in quotes. They go like their fingers,
Air quotes, judge.
Air quote, yeah. Joseph F. Rutherford demonstrated efficient leadership last night at the meeting in Brooklyn of the followers of the late Pastor Russell to elect elders, deacons, and other officers for the local congregation. The meeting was held at the Brooklyn Tabernacle. Not one of those members who were opposed to Judge Rutherford made any headway. Each time a member tentatively arose after his nomination as an elder or deacon to say that he was opposed to the seventh volume, a barrage of machine gun fire was turned on him from the platform by Brother Rutherford, who would say, "Under the circumstances, it will not be necessary to vote for you, but we will take a vote anyway." And then after the member had been swept to pieces, Brother Rutherford would run the tank over by him by adding, "The brother is not elected," or "The brother only got 4 votes," as the case might be. Early in the meeting, A.I. Ritchie, one of the directors of the Watchtower, ousted by Rutherford, opposed a motion that had been made to require the elders and deacons nominated to answer 3 questions affirmatively. The last and apparently most important of the 3 was whether the nominee would accept and teach the 7th volume. What's the 7th volume?
I don't know.
Mr. Ritchie protested that this was not in accordance with the rules laid down by the late Pastor Russell as one of the requirements for the servants of the church to carry on the harvest, and inadvertently mentioned something about disposed brothers.
Deposed brothers.
Yeah. So here's Rutherford. "I'm not going to listen to any more references to disposed brothers." Deposed brothers, interrupted Rutherford. "No one has been deposed." Mr. Ritchie subsided. The original list of candidates for the position of elders numbered 73 men, all of them selected by the old board of the elders and deacons. As Rutherford read the names one by one, the candidates stood up and answered 3 questions specified in the resolution. Every candidate answered yes to the first 2, and the third question, "Are you willing to teach the 7th volume or the finished mystery?" Oh, it's the finished mystery book.
Okay.
And Rutherford finished writing it.
So what they're saying is, are you going to teach one or the other, either the 7th volume or Rutherford's new finished mystery? Yeah, okay. And that was the rock upon which the opposition to Rutherford split. Yeah.
So Rutherford finished that finished mystery book, remember?
Yeah.
We haven't gone into that, or we didn't go in that direction
Not yet.
But anyways, that finished mystery book put him in jail. Yeah. So a dozen or more insurgents among them, longtime Charles Taze Russell's associates, was A.I. Ritchie, J.D. Wright, 2 of the authors of the pamphlet attacking Rutherford's financial methods, declared that they could not accept the 7th volume as genuine. By the term of the resolution, this statement automatically eliminated them as candidates. Rutherford gathered assurance after the first 2 or 3 of his opponents had been weeded out within the disturbance. Without disturbance. He declared that, though it was contrary to the resolution, he would put their names to the vote anyway.
So once he was confident that his opponents were going to lose, he actually would,
let them vote.
Yeah, it gave him more confidence, exactly.
The result completely justified his confidence. Whenever a candidate even hesitated over the question about the 7th volume, so the 7th volume must be what Rutherford wanted it to say. I thought it was called the finished mystery. Well, anyways, whenever a candidate even hesitated over the question about the 7th volume, the show of hands in favor of him was well under a dozen. Contrary minded by the same sign Rutherford said, the whole auditorium rustled as nearly every hand was thrust in the air. Rutherford smiled and called the next name. So the 7th volume, Russell wrote these volumes, and there was a 7th volume, and then Rutherford changed it to the finished mystery. So this was all about voting for the 7th volume or the finished mystery book. That's what I see happening here. But they all voted for Rutherford. Of course, if you didn't, you'd get ousted, right? So it says here, Rutherford smiled and called the next name. The election of the elders took more than an hour and a half, and so many extra names were proposed from the floor that Rutherford cautioned the congregation lest there be nobody left to elect as deacons. The roster of elders elected was 100% for Rutherford and the 7th volume. Okay, so Rutherford did call it the 7th volume. Less interest was taken in the election of the deacons because of the fact that they have relatively little power in the organization. As with the elders, however, the opposition was weeded out by the question regarding the 7th disputed volume of the Russell publications. When the business of the meeting had been finished, Rutherford made a plea for harmony in the organization. One nominee said, "I am not sufficiently satisfied that the 7th volume is scripture." "You are clearly out of order," interrupted Brother Rutherford. The nominee refused to stop speaking. "Will the brother please be in order?" insisted Brother Rutherford. "That shows that you have not the proper qualifications for an elder, for you can't be in order." "Thank you," sarcastically replied the nominee. He was not elected. Comments of others who were not elected were, B.D. Cook, "My judgment leads me to believe that the book is not scripture."
Ooh, that got him out.
Mr. Ritchie, "I do not recognize the book as one Pastor Russell told us to expect."
And he would have known.
Yeah, G. Wiley, "I have already expressed my protest."
Gone.
William Hollister,
Hollister.
"I could teach parts of the book and could just as conscientiously point out errors." Huh.
Yeah.
So Rutherford didn't like those.
And then look, all these guys withdrew their names.
So J. Perrell, D. Cahoon, and J. Barry withdrew their names.
Huh.
F. G. Mason also refused to accept 7th volume of B.F. Mitchell. Brother Rutherford said, "This brother has expressed himself entirely out of harmony with the truth."
Oh, there it is, the truth.
Yeah. In his closing address, and evidence that he simply had been imitating what he had learned years earlier during Democratic political party conventions, Brother Rutherford said, "The time has come to forget our differences. We should be a help and a blessing to each other. When the majority speaks in a decided manner, we ought to take that as the Lord's will. If I have done anyone an injury, I humbly and publicly apologize. I have no feeling against anyone and love everybody." Sounds like a politician.
Mm-hmm.
"We should have no other view than to hold fast to what the Lord has given us and not lose," and he'd drag it out, "not lose what we have." That's how he talked.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for that. So Mr. Ritchie, when he was asked whether he would take legal action to enforce the demands that the ousted directors have made on Brother Rutherford, naively replied, "The matter is in the Lord's hands." He said the same thing. "And we feel that he will settle it in his own way and own time better than the courts could do."
Wow.
See, that's what they say today.
Yeah.
Judge Rutherford refused to comment on the criticism of his management of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, issued a pamphlet form over the signatures of former directors. And it says, "I am not going to dignify them by discussing them. They are wholly irresponsible," he said. "Any irresponsible person can make an allegation. I won't talk about them at all." So when the statement that the finances of the society had not been audited was related, he called for a number of the Watchtower containing the annual financial report. And it says here in quotations, "You will see that we had an auditing committee of experts." Yes, the same ignorant yes man as above.
He had yes men all around him. Yeah. Okay.
So then it goes on. Joe Rutherford's past experience with rigid local intra-party elections also rigging local inter-party elections also came in handy in the 1920s when Rutherford decided to reorganize the Watchtower's branch office in Germany. After traveling to Germany, Rutherford called a meeting of 10-7 German pilgrims to supposedly allow them to nominate and elect a new branch manager of their own choosing. Of course, Boss Rutherford had no real intention of allowing anyone to be the German branch manager except for the person whom Rutherford had already decided on. Pilgrims Bernard
Buchholz.
How do you say that?
Buchholz.
Okay, and Paul
Baltzeriet,
Rutherford's choice, were nominated. Rutherford had the 7 German pilgrims cast secret ballots. Rutherford then counted the ballots himself and announced that Paul Belsertz won nearly unanimously by the vote of 6-1, making it appear that Paul Belzert also was Jehovah's choice. Joe Rutherford had to assume that Bernard
Buchholz would vote for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Days later, when the German pilgrims began talking amongst themselves, the other 5 German pilgrims discovered that each of them had voted for
Buchholz.
Bernard.
Yeah,
It all came out.
wow.
So Bernard Buchholz actually was the winner of the election, either by a vote of 5-2 or 6-1. None had the courage to confront Rutherford.
Wow.
I can't believe this.
Here we go.
Okay, this is another subheading. To the victors belong the spoils. As with any mafia organization, when there is a change in leadership, the captain and soldiers do not inherit the assets which they held in secret partnership with the former boss. The former boss's share goes to the new boss, and best as he can discover and figured such out. In the case of the Soda Lake gold mining operation described above, and that was in our last episode, we talked about that. As soon as Judge Rutherford was elected president in early January 1917, and as soon as he had things somewhat situated at the Watchtower headquarters, Rutherford headed to California in mid-February 1917. There, Rutherford set in motion the legalities to take over Charles Taze Russell's interests at the Soda Lake gold mine. Rutherford thereafter scurried back to the Watchtower headquarters in early March 1917. Frankly, we were not only surprised but shocked when we found that Judge Rutherford had put his personal name on this and then still mostly secret business operations. How many of you 21st century readers knew about the Soda Lake operation before you read about it here, or from one of the 4 multiple earlier disclosures over the past decade? Apparently, there was something going on with either Cole and or White such that Judge Rutherford needed to remove them from the picture. Neither did Rutherford trust Coup and others enough to leave Rutherford's interests legally undocumented. Ernest Coup was left behind not only to oversee the windup of the 1916 to 1917 mining season at Soda Lake and preparations for the upcoming 1917 to 1918 mining season, but also to oversee the operations of the Mena Film Company. In fact, Ernest Coup, whose background was in agricultural seeds in Ohio, spent a large portion of 1917 in California overseeing both businesses. 1917 was an extremely hectic year at the Mena Film Studio with the shooting and production of Restitution, and no expense was spared. So that was a movie they were shooting?
Yeah, it looks like they were already into studios at that point.
I think there is another section on all the businesses.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't covered yet. Okay, well, let's carry on. Researchers will note that Charles Taze Russell's name was never officially listed amongst the corporation owners of the Mena Film Company, Inc., or the Pyramid Film Company, Inc., nor their distribution affiliates, Perfection Advertising Company, and other yet to be discovered companies. However, anyone who believes that Charles Taze Russell did not have his fingers in those highly desirable pies are simply naive, dishonest, or both, as is anyone who believes that Judge Rutherford did not inherit Russell's secret interests in those operations. Pastor Russell's micromanaged everything having to do with the production of the photodrama of creation, and Russell thoroughly enjoyed this newfangled movie business. There is no way that Russell didn't have a financial interest in his drama's offspring. In 1912, Pastor Russell quietly made a significant real estate purchase in Manhattan, near Broadway at Central Park. On 63rd Street, the builder of a large new 3-story theater had gotten himself into financial troubles and was forced to sell the partially completed property. Does that sound familiar? Hammondville. That property became Russell's New York City temple, where religious services were conducted along with multiple daily showings of photodramas starting in January 1914. What received little or no publicity from Pastor Russell was the fact that Russell also purchased the adjacent 10-story mixed occupancy former hotel building, which was rented out as apartments, offices, and retail space. Typically, there were multiple transactions before the property was finally transferred into the hands of the People's Pulpit Association in November of 1913. As all of PPA's properties, these two new properties also were fully encumbered with full mortgages to retain all financial power within Russell's hands via his total control of the Watchtower Society.
So he was really diversified.
Yeah. An article in the Watchtower magazine, which did not mention the purchase of the adjacent buildings, boasted that the theater building was worth nearly $500,000. Actually, in 1915, the assessed value of the theater building was $220 million.
No.
That's what it says.
No, it does not.
No, 220,000.
That is correct.
Oh, so they're boasting that it was worth nearly $500,000.
But it was worth half that.
But it was assessed value was 220,000,
yeah.
And the assessed value of the former hotel was only 105,000. Those two large Manhattan properties were cashed out by Judge Rutherford after Russell's death in 1917 for $330,000, roughly $6.2 million.
Yep. In 2016 dollars.
Yeah, in 2016 dollars.
Wow.
So he pulled in a lot of cash just with those two buildings.
Mm-hmm.
As outlined in our Charles Taze Russell financial biography, Russell's main real estate straw man's buyer-seller, George Raymond, continued buying and selling real estate investment properties in and around Pittsburgh after Judge Rutherford became president in 1917. In fact, in the mid-1917, Rutherford apparently approved plans to subdivide into 77 one-acre lots the balance of the United Cemeteries, property not already designated for cemetery purpose. Just as advertising was being readied for such, Northside Catholic Cemetery stepped in and offered to purchase the entire tract, which was accepted.
So they were already selling land back then?
To the Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
The next heading is, all Jehovah's Witnesses are equal. But some Jehovah's Witnesses are more equal than others.
Okay.
Let's see what this is about. Over the decades, the Watchtower cult has published hundreds of experiences glorifying the sacrifices of common Jehovah's Witnesses around the world who have gone to jail or prison rather than violate the written and unwritten dictates set forth by the leaders of the Watchtower cult. Going to jail or prison for the sake of beliefs and practices of the Watchtower cult has long been considered a noble act, even a privilege, by the vast majority of rank-and-file Jehovah's Witnesses. Over the decades, the Watchtower cult has reinforced this mindset in its followers by never missing an opportunity to repeat a varying length account of time when the Watchtower president, Joseph F. Rutherford, and 7 of his followers were privileged to have served nearly 9 months in the federal prison during 1918 to 1919. That's all they did, eh?
It was a privilege.
So it's a privilege for the brothers in Russia today to go to jail.
Absolutely, it's a privilege. Anyways.
Yeah. So keeping with the tradition of these two sisters' websites of peeling back the layers of the Watchtower history and discovering what is actually lying beneath the painted-on surface, we now ask this question. Just how anxious were Judge Rutherford and his crew to suffer for their beliefs? We discovered that, just as is most of the Watchtower's cult self-reported history, the various attributions of bravery, faithfulness, loyalty, and other greatnesses heaped onto Judge Rutherford and his crew are typically mythological.
Mm-hmm.
Good word.
Made up.
When Judge Rutherford and his new crew were jailed at a time of conviction and thereafter shipped off to the federal prison, they had been convicted of federal crimes and they had no choice in matter. However, a segment of Rutherford's imprisonment story had been overlooked. There was a point in the prosecution of Rutherford and his crew when serving time in jail was actually optional, and Rutherford did not face up to such as a noble manner that has been portrayed over the decades by the Watchtower cult. When the federal marshals arrested Judge Rutherford and 5 other Bethelites at Brooklyn Bethel in May 1918, it's Woodworth Fisher were later arrested at their homes in
Scranton.
They were quickly taken before a federal judge and arraigned. Arraigned. What does that mean? Like put in jail? Booked. All pleaded not guilty. Bail was set for $5,000 for each of the 4 corporate officers, with $2,500 set for Robinson and DeKeka, totaling $25,000. Did Rutherford and his crew nobly accept their fate and sing hymns on their way back to jail while they waited patiently for their family or friends to arrange bail for each of them?
Nope.
Heck no. Joe Rutherford immediately attempted to put up all the property which the Watchtower cult owned in Brooklyn for bail. However, the USDC refused to accept as collateral real estate legally titled in the name of the People's Pulpit Association Religious Corporation. So this People's Pulpit Association, was that
I think that's what Russell started, like when he was starting his legal venture.
It's kind of a
and Rutherford hadn't changed the ownership of those buildings, right?
Yet.
So
So what would Joe Rutherford do? Had his failed attempt to post Jehovah's property as his bail given Joseph Rutherford time to rethink such all ill-conceived decisions? Would Joe Rutherford now decide to wait in jail until bail could be properly managed? Heck no. Fully experiencing his fiduciary responsibility as a corporate director and officer of a religious not-for-profit organization, Joe Rutherford right there and then decided to deed all of Jehovah's property located on Columbia Heights to an individual Brooklyn Bethelite named J.F. Stevenson.
Wow.
Once the property no longer belonged to Jehovah, but legally belonged to a human, it was accepted as collateral for bail as Rutherford and his crew. All that legal maneuvering must have taken hours, but it accomplished what Rutherford hoped it would accomplish. Neither Rutherford nor his 5 crew members had to spend that night in jail. Interestingly, Judge Rutherford either lied to the USDC about the recorded and unrecorded mortgages mentioned in the section above, or Rutherford had removed those multiple mortgages from the People's Pulpit Association property by May 1918. Just for background's sake, J.F. Stevenson, who was then a 38-year-old Bethelite and occasional Watchtower pilgrim, was the son of a prosperous Washington, D.C. businessman who coincidentally was Freemason, as was his brother, business partner, J.F. Stevenson, was not the only Watchtower pilgrim with Freemason connections. Starting back in the 1890s, Charles Taze Russell had begun choosing Freemasons as Watchtower pilgrims and for other prominent positions. He was hiring them. Thereafter, Pastor Russell continued to add Freemasons to prominent positions in his non-sectarian religious organization. Not by coincidence, over the years, Masonic temples across the United States began to open up their doors to both occasional and regular meetings of non-sectarian International Bible Students Associations. Notably, in 1903, Pastor Russell presided over the funeral of a Pittsburgh area Bible student and well-to-do businessman who also was Freemason. The deceased Freemason brothers attempted the funeral en masse and are presumed to have conducted FM rituals, Freemason rituals at the funeral and interment. Russell received $1,000 over, and that's over $31,000 in the 2016 dollars. Wow. Most interesting is the first fact that Charles Taze Russell founded much support among Freemasons living in the greater Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Before long, meetings of the Washington, D.C. International Bible Students Association were being held regularly at the Washington, D.C. Masonic Temple, either on Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings, or on Sunday evenings and Thursday evenings. After a second new Masonic temple was constructed in Washington, D.C., probable one-time Freemasons and prominent Bible students, General William P. Hall and J.T.D. Piles, both accompanied Russell on his infamous world tour that visited the Great Pyramid in 1912, formed a new IBSA group to meet regularly in that new Masonic temple on Sunday morning for public services, while Sunday and Thursday evening IBSA sessions continued. And that's the Masonic sessions, I'm assuming?
International Bible Students Association.
So their sessions continued to be held regularly at the old Masonic temple. So they were really connected to the Masons. So there's more to that than we think.
It sounds like Russell really kind of admired them.
Well, he hired them.
I know, admired them, yeah.
So in January 1913, Charles Taze Russell was named pastor of this new Washington Temple congregation. In addition to himself regularly appearing to preach for the Washington Temple congregation, Pastor Russell also sent Washington, D.C. a steady stream of his most prominent speakers from the Watchtower headquarters in Brooklyn. Attendances reportedly ranged widely from 400 to 1,200 persons per session, probably depending on the local popularity of the visiting Watchtower headquarters dignitaries. After the great dignitary?
Yep.
Russell, right?
Yep.
After the great disappointment of 1914, attendance fell off such that Washington, D.C. Bible students discontinued their public meeting at the new Masonic temple and returned to holding Sunday and Thursday meetings at the old Masonic temple. So that set them back, the 1914.
They kind of went underground again, yeah, after that didn't come true.
Caution to those researchers attempting to locate evidence that Charles Taze Russell became a Freeman at some point during his lifetime. First, if such
a thing did occur.
Okay, first, if such did occur, it happened later on in his lifetime, when occurred Russell's 180-degree change of attitude regarding Freemason and Freemasonry, not early in his lifetime, when Russell was openly anti-Freemasonry.
Masonry.
Second, if such did occur, Russell likely would have chosen to have been raised in a lodge which could guarantee secrecy, probably during one of his multiple trips to Scotland and not in the United States. And third, if such did occur, there's practically no chance that any record of such exists. There are public Freemasons, and then there are private Freemasons. There are no publicly accessible membership records of Freemasons or records of Freemasons who have never wanted their membership known outside of the Masonic circles. For instance, prior to the 21st century, the vast majority of attorneys throughout the United States, thus judges at every local, state, and federal level, were or are Freemasons. That legal judicial influence was abundantly exercised both inside and outside the courtroom. One thing that restrained the Freemasons' exercise of legal and judicial power from going nuclear was a large number of opposing attorneys and opposing litigants who were all Freemasons. We personally know of one ultimately sanctioned Freemason attorney who made the ultimate mistake of backstabbing his own client as a favor to opposing Freemason attorney and opposing Freemason litigant without exercising due diligence in discovering his own client's relatives and even more influential Freemason connections. Wow. Naive are those persons who publicly state that Charles Taze Russell was never a Freemason simply because Pennsylvania Freemason officials sent them a letter stating that Russell was not a Freemason. We have made multiple similar inquiries of multiple persons whom we knew for certainty were Freemasons, even providing the names and names and dates of the lodges they attended, and we received the same no record response.
So they're not confirming or denying anything. That's all. So don't use that as silence means yes.
If you're on the internet and you see these things that come up and this Freemason said Russell was never one, that's just some JW trying to protect Russell's interest.
Could be.
Well, yeah.
But what I'm saying, or what they're saying there, is it's Masonic policy to not confirm or deny. So you can't. Yeah.
Now here's the fourth one. Ignorant and naive as those persons who believe that in the 21st century Freemasonry is no longer proactively maneuvering Freemasons into the position of highly authority in the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government of the United States. So that statement's just saying that the Freemasons are all over.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
We know for a fact that unquestionably unqualified judges who are Freemasons have been elected and appointed to state and federal trial,
appellate,
and Supreme Court levels around the United States within the past decade. When this editor was in college, he, she, or it discovered that the leaders and the older members of one of the largest leading frats on campus consisted of all Freemasons. After college and after entering the business world, this editor discovered several international businesses in which it was required for upwardly mobile employees to be Freemasons. In one state, Freemasons controlled the JCs and the Lion Clubs by joining and electing only Freemasons to the other orgs, locals, and state leadership. Recently, Freemasons have nationwide made a move to control, wait for it, a major liberal legal organization best known by its four initials. Why do you think the major philosophy change over the past decade? I'm assuming that they already controlled the Democracy Party.
The Democrat
Party. They long to have controlled the Republicans. Their goal is to make certain that it does not matter whether they bet black, white, or red, and to make certain that I make the I's cross of those readers who are mental midgets. This editor personally has visited on multiple occasions this U.S. HQ of the Big I. Can you read the rest of that? The Big I.
Yeah.
Even if it's fictional labeled, it is not even never used. The label may not exist, but so does everything for which the label stands. Oh, the New World Order
is no longer
coming. It's already here. It may be prophetic Antichrist. Simply have to wait to see.
So the Big I, we have to do some, this is out of the US, so we're not quite familiar with the Big I, that stuff. Got more research.
I'm just reading for you guys what's on the paper in front of me. Well, that brings that subject to a close.
Yeah, I think so.
It's amazing how once we start digging into these guys, we find out they were into everything.
Oh, yeah. And I don't even think we know the half of it yet.
I found it interesting, the involvement in the Freemasons, like during Russell's time, and how they were doing their their churches. I guess they were having their churches held at the Freemasons temple. And then his pilgrims were those guys out in bicycles delivering his papers. He hired them, and they were mostly Freemasons. So there was involvement, for sure, according to this history anyways.
Yeah, it seems so.
So anyways, that brings an end to this program. Next time, we're going to cover, what it looks like a few of the business schisms. And then we're going to get into Rutherford's radio program. So stay tuned for next time, folks. And we will learn more about Rutherford.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay, bye for now.